I was sent a video of a friend of mine. He's a Braves fan. Any Braves fan in here? Oh, wow, you guys okay? This is going to be fun. This series is going to be fun. But I want you to know this is a church where the Braves fan and the Astros fan can worship side by side. Ain't that right, Darian? So, won't you stand up, Darian? This is Darian. This is my friend that at 11 o'clock last night, I requested a video that when the last out, and they sent me a video of him dancing around and dancing around and partying and celebrating. And I thought, we're gonna celebrate like that. We're gonna celebrate the King of Kings like that today. How about that, huh? But this will be a fun series to watch. But I'm glad that you're here. And if this is your first time, or you're coming back in a long time, we are in a series. We're talking about the topic of suffering. Suffering. So welcome to Praise Church on your first Sunday. I think it's an important topic to talk about because if you're going to take life seriously, you have to consider suffering. And you know, I hope that you don't suffer. We don't suffer all of our life, and that it takes up all of the life. But I do know this, that when we suffer, when that time is, it can be all consuming. That whatever you're suffering over at that time can be, you wake up in the morning, first thought, you go to bed thinking about it. It can be all consuming. And one of the questions that you're going to see at the end of the service, one of the three questions, is one of the questions that we talked about at our table this past week, this past Monday, as my family talked about this topic. I just raised the question, can you prepare yourself for suffering? You don't have to answer, but can you prepare yourself for suffering? Not knowing, and I don't like letting my mind go to what suffering may be. I don't like thinking about what that may be. But times, I wonder if this would happen to me, am I prepared to handle this? And as I thought about it throughout the week, I thought maybe I'm getting a little bit of feedback up here. Maybe the right question isn't, am I prepared, but am I equipped? I think there is a difference, maybe just a small nuance, right? But are you equipped for the suffering that may come your way in the future? How will you respond? And I think about Peter. You know, Peter thought that he wouldn't deny Christ. He told Christ 3 times. And I'm not saying suffering is going to cause us to deny Christ. I'm just saying that sometimes we think that I will never or I'll be ready. And when Peter got in this situation, he didn't follow up on what he said. And I wonder for myself, and I think you have to honestly ask yourself and be objective with yourself to say, are you equipped for suffering that may be in the future? For hard times, because we all know this. We all know that none of us are exempt. Like I think Peter talks about, don't be surprised. He said, don't be surprised when the fiery trials come upon you. As if that we're exempt from those things. And I don't want to, we would never take a trip and wait to get all of our goods or pack our suitcases when we get to the destination. And I don't think it's wise for any of us to wait till suffering comes to equip ourselves. I think part of the ability to be prepared for suffering is the equipping process while you're not suffering, so that when suffering comes, what is in the head, and hopefully what we have tried to work into our heart, to our belief, to trust, is ready, and that we have roads to access what we say we believe. And so it's moments like this when we talk about suffering, and I've never heard a series on suffering. And I come here today and I go, man, I was a little, I say nervous, not nervous or anxious, to be honest with you, is leaving today. And my wife asked me as I walked out the door, how do you feel about today? And I said, I'm just a little unsettled. It just didn't come together like I thought, like each week normally does. And I thought, maybe that's just a good thing. Maybe it's just a good thing that we could just get up here and be a little bit informal, a little more informal, and just talk about what it is to equip. Because really the question that I want to center around and talk about is, can That can there be any purpose in your pain? Let's say it like this. Can any good come out of our bad? And I think it most likely depends upon, what perspective that we take. And I'm not inferring, and I want this to be clearly noticed. I'm not saying that what you're experiencing and what our suffering is good. I'm not saying that's good. I'm just saying up until this time I have been it is what it is type guy. Almost like in approaching suffering and bad things, like it's stoically. I think that's the best way, stoically. There is a little bit of emotion, but mainly I have dealt with it intellectually and rationally, that I can't do anything about the situation, so therefore I just have to do whatever. So I'm not saying that the situation in itself is good. All I want to know is when we're in the suffering, can anything good, can there be purpose and meaning in that coming out of our suffering, despite the suffering? So Elie Wiesel, I think I'm saying that's right, he was a Holocaust survivor. He was in the Nazi concentration camps. And he said that the first night in the camps turned his life into one long night. Thought that was an interesting way for him to put that. The first night turned my life into one long night. And then he says 7 times cursed and 7 times sealed, whatever that means. 7 times cursed, 7 times sealed. If you studied the Nazi concentration camps and what those individuals experienced, and I've seen a few documentaries on it that just gave me a glimpse. It's horrendous. It's beyond the thought that I can even go. I can't even imagine what that was like. And you have people, survivors, that are writing about this. And the reason why he said that is because the first night he looked at the furnaces. And he said, I looked at the furnaces that were turning human beings, including children, into wreaths of smoke. It's like, how does the human mind even deal with an experience like that? And he said it destroyed his faith in God. His quote, "Never shall I forget those flames which consumed my faith forever. Never shall I forget those moments which murdered my God, and my soul turned my dreams to dust." So you'd ask him, he'd say, is there any purpose in your pain? Is there any way anything good can come out of your bad? And Wessel would say, no. From these writings, from these quotations, it said no. But yet there was another man that was in the concentration camps. His name is Viktor Frankl. Anybody ever heard of Viktor Frankl? Can I see your hand? He wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning, an incredible book, and he just chronicles his experience in those concentration camps. And they stripped everything away from him. They put him in this tiny little holding place. And I think he said there was a little window where he could just see outside. And he said he made this determination in his mind: you can take everything away from me, including my family, my clothes, my food, but you can't take my ability to choose how I'm going to respond. I go, how in the world can someone like that dig down so deep and in a moment of such suffering, horrendous suffering and loss, still come out to say, you can't take my ability away to how I'm going to choose? And what he began to do is project that when I come out of this, years, 10, 15, 20 years, I'm going to stand in the university and I'm going to teach students about how to deal with suffering. And for some reason, with this guy, he was able to experience the same thing Wiesel experienced, but yet find purpose and meaning in it. To say, this is I'm not calling this event good, but something good is going to come out of this. He says the problem, this is Frankl's writing, the problem is that contemporary people think life is all about finding happiness. We decide what conditions will make us happy, and then we work to bring those conditions about. And when suffering comes along, it takes those conditions away. And suffering destroys meaning. And then he made a conclusion. He says, an increased faith is the only way to go into an environment that strips you of all that you have, all of your earthly sources of significance, security, and purpose. It's the only way that you can go in and come out intact, feeling like there's meaning and purpose. It reminds me of what Paul wrote. As Paul writes in 2 Corinthians 4, 7 through 11, he says, but we have this treasure. We have this treasure. And he calls his physical body a jar of clay. I have this treasure, talking about the Holy Spirit, in jars of clay to show that the surpassing power belongs to God and not to us. And then he goes on with his suffering. He says, we are afflicted in every way, but we're not crushed. And maybe you're afflicted today. And maybe this could be your statement that I'm afflicted, I'm not crushed, perplexed, not driven to despair, persecuted, but not forsaken, struck down, but not destroyed. And Paul writes, always carrying in the body the death of Jesus, so that the life of Jesus may be manifested in our bodies. And what he's saying here is that even in my suffering, I believe that Jesus, that who I serve can receive glory and honor. And if this is what it takes, that my purpose and meaning can never be taken away, because what I want is my greatest purpose is not my ease. My greatest purpose is not my happiness. But my greatest purpose is that glory would be given to God. Therefore, in my suffering, God can receive glory. And he says, I'm always carrying in the body the death of Jesus, so that the life of Jesus may be manifested in our bodies. For we who live are always being given over to death for Jesus' sake. Read the New Testament and look at the suffering that they went through. Look at Stephen being stoned on his knees, and he looks up and he sees Jesus standing at the right hand of God. Look at the suffering that our New Testament people, that are the first century believers and fathers of our faith, they believed in their faith so much that they would say, consider it pure joy when you face trials of many kinds, because the testing of your faith will develop perseverance. And I'm going, where do you get a faith that deep? Where do you get a faith where you ultimately say, you know what, this really hurts right now, but the purpose of today is not my happiness or my comfort, but the purpose today is, God, when I put my head down on the pillow at the end of the day, that you have received glory and honor, meaning that I have pointed people towards who you are. What an incredible faith. And I'm not saying that I'm there, and I'm not saying, one of my, I'd say, fears or anxieties of today was that this was going to come across very condescending or condemning or make us feel worse as we go out. And that's not. What I hope today would be to give us a vision of what can be, even during our suffering, like a vision that when I'm suffering, this could be, because, this has been precedent. For we who live are always being given over to the death for Jesus' sake, so that the life of Jesus may be manifested in our mortal flesh. J. Christian Becker is another that lived in concentration camps. He lived in Berlin, and he saw the same sights, and he suffered as well. But during his enslavement, he determined to become a Christian theologian and eventually write a book called Suffering and Hope. Tagline, the biblical vision and the human predicament. And he talks about how the hope of the resurrection and the future renewal of all things, the restoration of all things, how that helps us go beyond the present power of death and show and take the power out of death and show its empty future. And I'm going, you've got different people, and Viktor Frankl writes about this, how different people went into the concentration camps and different people responded differently. Some were drawn closer to God. He talks about even on the cattle trucks, when they were on the train and they were being brought to their camps, how some people would just huddle up and pray. And they were drawn closer to God. And some would get angry and be angry. It's all about, can there be purpose in your pain? It's going to depend upon your perspective. It's going to depend upon my perspective. And today we live in this ocean, this current that pushes us to say there cannot be any meaning in your pain. There can not be any purpose in your pain. It can only be called an interruption to your life. So Charles Taylor, he coined a phrase that's called imminent frame. The imminent frame. So for you to be able to identify or to understand what an imminent frame is, just think about a picture frame. And Charles Taylor says the imminent frame talks about you have this border, this frame. And the only thing that's real, or the only thing for those who believe in the imminent frame, is what's inside the frame. What's imminent? Imminent is close, it's near. Meaning that the only thing that really exists is the natural world. So outside of this frame, there is no transcendent being. There's no transcendence. It's all imminent. And so if you're going to find meaning according to the imminent frame, if you're going to find meaning, then you have to find it inside the frame, what is natural. And this is reiterated by people like Richard Dawkins, who would write something like, the total amount of suffering per year in the natural world is beyond all decent contemplation. And I think we would agree with that. It's overwhelming. But then he goes on, in a universe of blind physical forces and genetic replication, that's natural, that's imminent frame. Blind physical forces and genetic replication, some people are going to get hurt, other people are going to get lucky, and you won't find any rhyme or reason in it, nor any justice. The universe that we observe has precisely the properties that we should expect if there is, at bottom, no design, no purpose, no evil, no good. He says nothing but pitiless indifference. Because if that's all that there is that's existing inside the frame, all you have is what is natural. All you have is DNA. It's like, in the wild, we know that the strong eats the weak. So for humans, it's just DNA. The strong can eat the weak. The powerful can trample over the weak. It doesn't matter because it's only all we have is nature and DNA and genetic replication. So Alfred Hausmann, he also said, way before Richard Dawkins said that, but Hausmann said, for nature, heartless, witless nature will neither care nor know. DNA neither cares nor know. DNA just is. And then he said, and we have to just dance to its music. Meaning if it's all we have, if there's nothing outside the natural world, then the only place that you can find meaning, the only place that I can find meaning is inside the confines of this world and inside the confines of your life. Therefore, you have to find purpose inside this box. You can't find purpose outside the box. There's nothing greater. It's just inside the box. Therefore, what is our purpose then if it's just nature? It's our comfort. We're going to try to build a life that makes our life comfortable. And we're going to build a life that serves us, that makes us happy. It's about self-fulfillment. It's about self-freedom. It's about individual autonomy. But here's the problem with that. Anything then that comes into our life that blocks all of these things that we call purpose inside this imminent frame become interruptions to our life, because our pursuit is to achieve happiness, self-fulfillment, freedom. And then when we suffer, when we get sick, someone betrays us, that is an infringement upon what we have decided is our purpose. Therefore, all we have to do is we have to try to avoid all suffering, or we have to try to eradicate suffering altogether, because that's the only way. Suffering is going to take our purpose away. That's how life has to be lived if we live only inside of the imminent frame. Alvin Plantinga, let me give you another conclusion that was made by a guy named Stephen Reichstra. He talks about this insect called the no-see-um. No-see-um. Anybody ever heard of a no-see-um? I guess it's an insect in the Midwest, and it's invisible. Like, we got a picture of it right here on the screen. You see it right at the bottom left? It's that's it right there. I would guess it's like a chigger, like a red bug. It has a strong bite to it. And his point was, you can't say that there's no-see-ums around, because you can't see them. You can't say it's not here. And what they are doing, what he is doing in a line of reasoning, is he's saying that we cannot say that there's not any purpose, because sometimes purpose is like the no-see-um. You, in our finite minds, may not see purpose. But yet, we don't live just inside of an imminent frame. There's also somebody outside the imminent frame that is much greater than us, that's infinite. And just because we can't see it doesn't mean that it's not there. I'll read you what Alvin Plantinga wrote. This is from Tim Keller's book, Walking with God Through Pain and Suffering. He says, I look inside my pup tent. I don't see a St. Bernard. It's probable there's no St. Bernard in the tent. That is because if there were one, it is highly likely I would have seen it. It's not easy for a St. Bernard to avoid detection in a small tent. Then he said, again, I look inside my tent and I don't see any no-see-ums. This time, it's not particularly probable that there are no no-see-ums in my tent. The reason is that even if there were no-see-ums there, I wouldn't see them because they're too small. And then he goes on, and now the question is whether God's reasons, if any, for permitting such evils are more like St. Bernards or are they more like no-see-ums? So given God's unlimited knowledge and our limited knowledge, it should not surprise us that we would have a difficult seeing. I can't conclude, and I'm saying if you live that there is more than just life inside of an imminent frame, and I believe that you do because you're here, the majority of you guys would believe that there is a transcendent being that we call God. And because I can't see reason or good at the moment, it doesn't mean that it's not there. How does that help you in suffering and pain? That doesn't tell me the purpose why I'm suffering. It doesn't necessarily say this is exactly what it is. It does, though, in the moment, say that I believe that God is sovereign, and I believe even though I can't see good coming out of this, I can trust that just because I can't see it doesn't mean that it's not there. Because let me just speak from my experience, and I want to be clear. I have not experienced suffering as it pales in comparison to some people in this room. And I honestly, when I started thinking about speaking on suffering, I had some resistance because you got to be careful what you speak about. But when I look back at the suffering that I have experienced, there have been moments where I had a difficult time seeing good in the moment or purpose in the moment. It was difficult there when you're in the suffering and pain. But I find it interesting that after 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and you can do this, and I'm sure you can do this right now. You could choose something that maybe happened 4 or 5 years ago, 10 years ago, that was terrible. You would never want to repeat. But as you look back on it, you can see, you don't want to live it again, but you can see some good things that come out of it. I hear stories, I tell stories, I hear stories from people. I heard one yesterday that said I would never want to go relive that event in my life, but it is the very thing that taught me, and they filled in the blank. And it humbled me, and it brought me to my senses, and it connected me to people that now I know love me. But in the moment, why is it so difficult for us to be able to see meaning and purpose? It is difficult. Maybe we're shrouded with so much emotion. Maybe there's so much pain that it causes our thinking to be super clouded. But then from our experience, and I think this would go 100% across the room, that when we're 5 years down the road, we look back, again, never wanting to live it again, but to go, wow, if that wouldn't have happened, where would I be today? In fact, the reason that thing happened and the reason why I am where I am today, in fact, some of you guys may be sitting in church today because of an event that forced you to realize how weak you really were, how much of God you really needed. And if that wouldn't have happened, maybe, I don't know, maybe you wouldn't be pursuing God like you are. Do we want it? Do we want to repeat that again? Do I want to repeat the suffering that's happened in my life? Absolutely not. But would I replace the lessons that I've learned? So this past week, and I mean, this was, as I was almost writing this, looking on social media, I saw one of our ladies in the church make a post. Her name is Brianna Peacock. Brianna is a part of Praise and got married this past year. She's also Scott Hawk's daughter. Scott Hawk is our executive pastor. And she reposted a post that she made in 2016. And I called and I asked her, I said, do you mind if I read your post? And I thought, you know what, if you post this on social media, I don't think I need to ask, right? But just to be kind, just to go the right routes, I'm going to call. So I called or text, and she gave me permission. And I want to read to you what she wrote. She says, as you all probably know, I got adopted today, along with my two younger brothers and my older sister. I have never felt so happy or peaceful. At my age, it is very rare to be adopted. When my parents' rights were terminated, I was already 16. That is when I found out that me and my younger siblings were going to be able to be adopted. Many of my friends' reactions to hearing I was going to be adopted was, why? You're almost 17. Just go live on your own. That's what I would do. Then she said, here's why. I wanted a family. I wanted to know that I was wanted and that I wasn't a waste of space. I didn't want my life to just continue on while I only continued to feel empty. This may seem like I'm rambling on, but I promise this has purpose. For the majority of my life, I believed that God had abandoned me. I would think to myself as a child, if there really is a God, is he cruel? Why does he allow me to live this way? And looking back now, though, I can see times when he was there. I was just blinded by feelings of betrayal and hurt. It may seem funny to say, but being placed into foster care this time around has been the best thing. What? How can you get to a place as a kid, as a 16-year-old kid, and say being placed in foster care has been the best thing that ever happened to me? But yet when we're in the moment, isn't it so difficult to be able to say there's something good that can come out of this? I came so close to God. There were months where my siblings and I were in emergency placement facility. In those 6 or so months, I felt so alone, but I knew that God was always there to listen. I guess what I'm trying to say is, God is in control. Don't ever doubt what he's doing, because everything that I've been through has made me the strong and caring person that I am today. He blessed me, and I wanted a family, but he knew that I needed a family. And she says, and for that, I'm forever grateful. Forever grateful for the toughest time in her life, because what has come out of it has been something good. So, as followers of Christ, of Jesus, believers in God, in a sovereign God, we believe that there's more than just an imminent frame. We believe that what's going on is greater than just what's inside of the box. Therefore, we can make a conclusion, even though we don't know what that purpose is or what the good is, we can make a conclusion that meaning can be found not just despite our suffering, but through our suffering. Like for those in this room right now that you are suffering, that it is very painful, it is tough. We can believe, because we live with more than just what's natural. We live with a transcendent God, that there is purpose and there is a meaning that can be accomplished even through our suffering. Not saying that what caused us to suffer is good, but since that's what we have, we can say that good can come out of this. Because our story is a part of a much larger story. We believe that God has a meta-narrative. And ever since the beginning of time, ever since humans walked this earth, there was a story that had begun unfolding. And since the beginning, there's a story. And the storyline, and we know it, we've taught it here, hopefully you know it, it's creation, everything the way God wanted it to be, fall. Sin enters the world. Redemption. Jesus comes and restores the world or makes us right with God. And then the last chapter is the renewal of all things. And ever since the beginning of time, God has been writing a story. And our story, and your story, and my story falls in between the time that Jesus come to say, I'm going to right the wrong, and I'm going to make it where you don't have to pay for your sin. And that's where we have come after that. But we're right before the renewal and the restoration of all things. And that the story is going on, and that your micro story, your itty bitty story, remember the rope example, your little bit of story on this long, long rope that's been unfolding, your little bitty story can move God's story to the ultimate end of Him renewing all things, restoring this world, bringing restoration. Someone say, well, you think God intentionally brought this suffering upon me so that His story could go on? I don't know. I just know ultimately He's in control. I can't get beyond that. But I do know this, that He could use your story wherever you're at for His glory. Because in the scope of things, and I don't like to admit this, but my story is just itty bitty part of a much larger story. Have you ever asked yourself, what's going on in this world? Like, is there something greater? I mean, we have to conclude there has to be something greater going on in this world than just my life. And isn't it amazing that God would take what Joseph said? Joseph was sold and put in he just had a lot of suffering. And the reason why he was suffering is because his brothers wanted to get rid of him. Family betrayal. And he told his brothers later on, years later, he said, what you meant as harm, God turned out for good. You hear what he's saying? My suffering was a result because of your betrayal. But my God is so transcendent and big that He took my suffering and turned it in for the good. What a perspective to say, I can't change where I am. I can't change what's going on. But God, I'm so committed to you that not only will I give you my successes, I'm going to give you the deepest hurts, the deepest pains that I experience. And I will lift that up to you. And sir, if you could even use this to make your story and your name great, so be it. Now I'm saying, is it easy? And I don't know. I pray that if it's, God, I don't want to experience suffering, but if it gets to a point where I have the terrors of life come to me, I pray that in the quiet of my heart, I would be so committed to the story of God that I would be able to say, God, even take my pain and use it for your glory. John records a story or a dialogue of Jesus. John knew Jesus extremely well. He was a very close friend of Jesus, a disciple of Jesus. He preserves this story. And he writes this. He says, and Jesus answered them, the hour has come for the Son of Man to be glorified. So he's referring to the crucifixion. Truly, truly, I say to you, unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it remains alone. But if it dies, it'll bear much fruit. Whoever loves his life loses it. Whoever hates his life in this world will keep it for eternal life. If anyone serves me, he must follow me. And where I am, there will my servant be also. If anyone serves me, the Father will honor him. And then he says this, and I want you to see how honest Jesus is, because I think you can be just as honest. Now my soul is troubled. My soul is troubled. And what shall I say? Just like I'm hurting, I'm suffering. What shall I say? Father, save me from this hour? That was a question. Father, save me from this hour? And then he says, but for this purpose, I have come to this hour. My story is a part of a larger story. Father, glorify your name. Then a voice came from heaven and says, I've glorified it, and I will glorify it again. Now, I just want to unpack glory for just a moment. When Jesus says, glorify your name. In the Old Testament, the word glory comes from the Hebrew word kabod. That means weight or importance. In the New Testament, it comes from a Greek word called doxa. That means praise, wonder, and beauty. And when he says glorify, Jesus says is glorify your name. He said basically through this act, this crucifixion, this suffering that I'm about to go through, may it bring weight and importance to your name. Or maybe may it bring praise, wonder, and beauty to your name. And the moment when God's glory was most brilliantly revealed was on the cross. On the most horrific suffering that we could imagine was the time that the character and the beauty of God, both love and justice, coming for you, was revealed. That Jesus would say, who for the joy set before him endured the cross. Why? Because Jesus was committed to his Father's will so much that it went beyond his ease, his comfort, his happiness, his success, his autonomy, his ability to run away from the cross. Not that he didn't ask for it, right? God, if there's another way, but if not, your will be done. And we get to a point where we say, God, may my brokenness, may my pain, may my loneliness, may the rejection that I experience, you go on and fill in the blank. But may even those things bring you glory, give you weight, give you importance, show the world the wonder of who you are, show the world your characteristics. So what this does, what today does, is it causes us to take this onion that we call Christianity and peel it and peel it and peel it and peel it till we get to right in the core to say, why do we really serve God? Is it because of what he can do for us? Or is it because of what we can bring to the table for him? And just like it is right now, it's a solemn topic. And I'm not saying that I'm there. I want to be there. I would love to say, if whatever happens to my life, give me whatever. I don't know. But what I can do is I can equip myself right now to say, God, that is what I would love to be. I would love to know you so well that no matter what comes my way, my trust is in you. So that's why we wanted to leave worship towards the end of the service, so that you could reflect and pursue and go after God. You may want to kneel. You may want to stay where you are. My encouragement to try to shepherd your heart is to say, wherever you are in this process, to go after God and to be able to say that even in my suffering, God, I want to be in a place to lift that up to you and say, really, it's all about you. May you receive the importance, the weight, the beauty. Let's pray before we worship God. Sometimes it's so easy to make commitments, to say promises. As your son well knows, to walk through is painful. God, may we get to a place and may we become so convinced of who you are that not only we give you our successes and our joys, but we also give you our suffering and our pain. And we lift it up to you on an altar to say, you receive glory. You receive honor. In my own heart and from the people that would observe how I walk through this suffering. So God, in the next moments, we want to pursue you. And we want to say we want to seek you first. We don't want anything else in this world to come in front of you. So God, may you receive all the glory, all the honor, all the praise. In Jesus' name, amen. Won't you stand? Let's worship.